She looked at me too long, and I knew right then this was a mistake I'd keep making. The backyard was full of noise, grill smoke, kids screaming at each other, somebody's playlist blaring too loud. And yet when she tilted her head and asked if I could help carry the cooler inside, everything else dimmed like somebody turned the volume down. I followed her through the sliding door. It shut behind us with a soft click, and the party noise thinned into a dull hum. The kitchen was cooler, cleaner, too bright. She stood by the counter, the light catching the edge of her hair. She was older than everyone else at the barbecue, older than me by decades. That fact hung in the air, but she didn't flinch from it. She reached for a glass, opened the freezer, and said casually, "Ice?" Her voice wasn't asking. More like testing how I'd stand there, how close I'd lean. I stepped toward her, close enough to hear the faintest shake in her breath when she exhaled. My hand brushed the freezer door as I pretended to help. A pointless gesture. She could have lifted the whole tray without me. But the space between us was suddenly too sharp to ignore. She avoided my eyes, studying the ice cubes clattering into the glass. Her fingers lingered too long on the rim, knuckles pale, and she shifted her weight like she wasn't sure if she wanted to move closer or farther away. "Ice melts fast out there," she murmured, finally glancing up. I should have answered something simple. Instead, I stalled, half smiling, half caught in the heat climbing my neck. She saw it, I'm sure. She saw more than I wanted her to. The silence stretched. The fridge hummed. The glass fogged under her hand. She cleared her throat, almost covering it with a small laugh. "You're quiet," she said. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. My voice cracked softer than I meant, and I hated how young it sounded. She studied me, not unkindly. Her eyes traced me too long, like she was memorizing something she had no right to keep. Then she turned, slid the glass across the counter, and for a second her hand brushed mine. Accidental, probably. Still, it jolted me. "Better take this out before it all melts," she said. But she didn't move. Neither did I. The party outside still throbbed faintly, but the kitchen was its own world, cut off and charged with a heat no ice could fix. I finally reached for the glass. My fingers wrapped around the cool surface, her hand just an inch away. She didn't pull back right away. She let the closeness linger, and in that tiny pause, it felt like the air folded in on itself. Then she withdrew, quick enough to make it seem like nothing had happened. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, straightened her shoulders, and gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Go on," she said, voice steady now, like she'd found the switch to turn it all off. I carried the glass back toward the door, but before I slid it open, I looked over my shoulder. She was still standing there, arms crossed loosely, lips pressed together like she'd swallowed something bitter. Our eyes caught. Just for a second. Long enough to promise that this wasn't the end of it. I thought stepping back outside would reset me. Sunlight, smoke, beer in hand, normal. But it didn't fade. Not the brush of her fingers, not the way her eyes caught mine when she thought no one else was looking. The whole barbecue blurred. I talked, laughed when people laughed, nodded at stories, but my mind kept circling back to the kitchen. To her. She didn't avoid me completely. That would have been easier. She moved through the crowd in soft patterns, always close enough to remind me she was there. At one point, she stood across the yard, sunglasses hiding her eyes, but her mouth curved like she knew I was watching. Maybe she liked knowing. Later, when most people had left, I found myself by the sink rinsing plates. Not my house, not my job, but I needed something to do with my hands. She walked in, holding a half-empty tray of skewers. "You don't have to do that," she said, setting it down. "Somebody should. You're a guest." I shrugged, still scrubbing. "I don't mind." She leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching. For a while, it was just the faucet running and the clink of dishes. Then she asked, "You live alone?" "Yeah. Apartment across town." "Girlfriend?" The word landed heavier than it should have. I shook my head. "Not anymore." She didn't press, but I felt the silence tugging at me, so I added. She said I was too restless. Too much in my head. Her lips pressed together, and she nodded slowly. I know that one. You? I asked before I could stop myself. She gave me a small smile, but it wasn't warm. Divorced. Years ago. He wanted someone younger. And he got her. Her hands fiddled with the edge of the counter, nails tapping lightly, too steady for her voice. It's quieter now. Not worse, not better. Just quiet. I stopped washing, the plate heavy in my hands. I wanted to say something, anything, but nothing felt right. She must have seen the pity rising in my throat, because she cut it off with a quick shake of her head. Don't, she said softly. I don't need sympathy. I swallowed, turned back to the sink. Wasn't sympathy. Her laugh was short, surprised. Then what was it? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My hands moved automatically, rinsing dishes, but my chest was too tight. She stepped closer, set a glass beside me. Close enough that her shoulder brushed mine. It wasn't a heavy touch, just the barest weight of contact. My skin woke up like it had been asleep for years. She didn't move away right away. Her breath touched my arm as she leaned slightly, as if she were watching the stream of water with me. For a second, it was so quiet the party could have been miles away. You don't talk much, she said finally. I talk too much, I muttered. Just not when it matters. That made her smile. A real one this time. She turned her head, and we were suddenly closer than I'd prepared for. If I tilted an inch, our lips would have been. She pulled back, sharp and practiced, like she'd done it before. Her hand found the tray again, fingers curling around the edge too tightly. You should go. I'll finish these. But she didn't move either. We stood locked there, the faucet running, her knuckles white, my pulse hammering. It wasn't love, not yet. It wasn't anything you could name. Just a charge between two people who shouldn't want what they wanted, and couldn't unwant it either. Finally, she reached over, turned the faucet off. The sudden silence cracked something open. She pressed the towel into my hand, her fingers folding over mine. Warm, deliberate. Too deliberate. Thank you, she whispered. It wasn't about the dishes. We both knew it. The house had quieted, most of the guests gone. The few that stayed were outside finishing beers, voices muffled by the sliding door. Inside, it was just me, rinsing my glass, and her, leaning against the counter like she had nowhere else to be. You're still here, she said. I nodded. So are you. She laughed under her breath, then tilted her head, studying me the way someone studies a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit. Her arms were crossed, but her eyes were restless, darting between mine and the floor. You should. She stopped, shook her head. Never mind. The air stretched tight, almost unbearable. I wanted to ask what she meant, but before I could, her phone buzzed against the counter. The sound made both of us jump. She grabbed it too quickly, pressing the screen close to her chest, as if the words flashing there weren't for anyone else's eyes. I caught a glimpse, a name, a man's name. She turned her body slightly, tapping out a reply with hands that moved too fast. My throat tightened. I didn't ask. When she set the phone down again, the spell between us wasn't broken, just cracked. I moved to set my glass in the sink, and as I passed, her hand caught my wrist. Stay, she said quietly. Her grip was soft, but it froze me in place. She must have realized how much weight sat in that one word, because she let go quickly, pressing her palm against the counter instead. I didn't mean, she started. Yes, you did, I said, surprising myself. The silence after was heavy, almost dangerous. She looked up sharply, and our eyes locked. My chest pulled me forward before my brain caught up. I stepped closer. Too close. The fridge hummed, my pulse louder than that. Her breath brushed my jaw when she whispered, "This is wrong." "Then why are you shaking?" Her lips parted, but no words came. I could see it. The fine tremor in her hands, the way her body leaned half an inch toward mine even as her mind fought the other way. And then, the door creaked. Laughter spilled in. A friend staggered through, heading for the bathroom, barely glancing at us. We sprang apart, her shoulder nearly knocking the spice rack, my heart slamming in my throat. The friend disappeared down the hall, and we froze, listening until the door shut again. Her hand lifted halfway toward me, then faltered. "This can't." I cut in before she could finish. "I know." But I didn't move back. Neither did she. Her arm brushed mine, her breath warm on my neck. She closed her eyes for a second, just 1 second too long, and I thought, this is it, this is where it happens. It didn't. She pulled back, lips pressed tight, and whispered, "Everyone would notice. Everyone would talk." "I don't care," I said, though my voice cracked on the last word. Her eyes softened at that. Not pity, something heavier. She reached up, fingers grazing the side of my face, barely touching, like she was afraid I'd vanish if she pressed harder. Then footsteps echoed again in the hall. She dropped her hand instantly, retreating toward the counter, voice steady now. "We should clean up before someone asks questions." But her eyes told the truth. She hadn't let me go, not even for a second. And when I passed her the dish towel, our fingers tangled longer than they should have, a quiet promise neither of us dared to speak. By the time night fell, the last of the guests had gone. The house was quiet, dim, carrying the ghost of laughter and grilled smoke. I should have left with the others, but she asked if I could help fold the chairs, carry the trash out. I said yes too quickly. We ended up on the porch, just the two of us. The air was cool, damp with the threat of rain, and the yard stretched out dark and still. She leaned against the railing, arms wrapped tight, like she was holding herself together. I set the last trash bag down and wiped my palms on my jeans, pretending I wasn't watching her too closely. "You don't know what you're doing," she said suddenly, not looking at me. "What do you mean?" Her laugh was low, humorless. "You're too young to understand what this would cost." I stepped closer. "Try me." That made her look at me, really look, her face caught in the faint glow of the porch light. Her eyes were raw, unguarded, full of something between fear and want. "You think this is just about wanting each other," she whispered. "But people talk. They always talk. About women like me. About boys like you." "Boys?" I repeated, my jaw tight. Her lips pressed together. She hadn't meant it like that, but it landed anyway. I closed the distance between us until my hands gripped the railing on either side of her, boxing her in without touching her. "Do I look like a boy right now?" Her breath caught. I could feel it against my chest. The space between us hummed, unbearable. She lifted a hand, hesitated, then brushed a strand of hair off her cheek. My fingers moved on instinct, catching her wrist, guiding it back, letting my thumb trace the line of her pulse. It raced beneath my touch, matching mine. "You shouldn't," she breathed. "I can't stop," I said. The silence stretched. Rain began to patter softly on the porch roof, steady, like a drum keeping time with my heartbeat. She leaned into me, not all the way, just enough that her shoulder brushed my chest. I bent down, my lips hovering near her ear. "Say you don't want this, and I'll leave." Her hand slid up, flattened against my shirt, clutching the fabric like she needed it to stay upright. "I can't say that." Her confession hit harder than any kiss could have. I felt it in my ribs, in my throat, in the ache that had been building since the kitchen. I tilted my forehead against hers, the rain smell washing over us, her breath shallow against my mouth. Everything blurred into this single moment, the damp wood beneath us, the faint buzz of a street light, the heat of her body leaning into mine despite everything she'd said. And then, the porch light flicked off. A voice from inside called her name. We both froze, hearts in our throats. She pulled back just an inch, but it was enough to break the spell. Her chest rose and fell fast, her eyes darting to the door, then back to me. I didn't step away. Couldn't. Her lips parted, so close to mine that one breath more would close the gap. "I can't keep this up," she whispered, trembling. And just as my hand cupped the side of her face, the screen door creaked. We were out of time. The morning after, I told myself I wouldn't see her. That the near kiss on the porch, the breath we almost shared, belonged to the dark and the rain. Daylight should have burned it away. But when my phone buzzed, it wasn't her name. It was a mutual friend from the BBQ. "Heard you and Claire were getting close. Didn't expect that." My stomach dropped. I read it twice, then again, searching for another meaning. There wasn't one. Someone had seen. By the time I showed up at her house that evening, rain clinging to my jacket, my pulse was hammering too hard to pretend I was casual. She opened the door slowly, like she'd been bracing for this. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Someone knows," I blurted. Her face went pale, then flushed. She stepped aside, letting me in, shutting the door with more force than necessary. The house was dim, shadows pooling in the corners, as if it too knew we were trespassing. "Who?" she asked, voice tight. I showed her the message. Her eyes flicked over it once, then she pressed the phone back into my hand, turning away. "They'll talk," she muttered. "They'll make it worse than it is." "Worse than what?" I stepped closer. "Nothing's even happened." She spun back, her voice sharp. "It has. You think it hasn't, but it has." The words lodged in the space between us. Her hands shook as she crossed her arms, hugging herself like she needed a barrier. I wanted to reach for her. I didn't. Not yet. "What are you so afraid of?" I asked. Her laugh broke halfway through. "You. Me. The way I look at you when I shouldn't. The way you stand too close." I closed the gap then, slowly, deliberately. My chest nearly brushed hers. "Like this?" Her breath hitched, her lips parting. She didn't step back. "Stop," she whispered, but it wasn't steady. Her body betrayed her, the tremor in her fingers, the way her shoulders leaned toward me as if they'd made up their mind before she had. I raised a hand, not touching, just hovering near her cheek. "Tell me you don't think about it." Her eyes flicked shut, then open again, burning into mine. "Every damn day," she admitted. The confession knocked the air out of me. I touched her face then, thumb brushing her cheekbone. She shivered, not from cold. "You're not supposed to say that," I whispered. "You're not supposed to make me." We stood there, gravity pulling us together, fear clawing us apart. Her hand found my chest, pressing against me as if to push me back, but instead it just rested there, fingers curling into the fabric of my shirt. The silence was alive. I could hear the clock ticking in the other room, the faint creak of the floor under her shifting weight. Then she broke it. "There's more," she said, voice cracking. I froze. "I told myself I wouldn't get close to you," she continued. "But it wasn't just because of the age. Or the talk. It's because I know myself. When I fall, I don't stop." Her words weren't neat. They came out raw, jagged, pulled from somewhere deep. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I leaned in just enough that my forehead brushed hers. Our breaths tangled, her eyelashes trembling against my skin. And that's when the knock came at the door. We tore apart like guilty teenagers, hearts racing. Neither of us moved to answer it. The knocking stopped, silence rushing in heavier than before. Her hand was still warm on my chest. My palm still remembered the shape of her cheek. She looked at me, desperate, cornered, alive in a way that scared us both. "We can't go back now," she whispered. And she was right. Whatever came next, the safe line we'd clung to was gone. The knock at the door never came again. Whoever it was had left. But the silence it left behind was louder than anything. We didn't move. We couldn't. Her hand still rested on my chest. My forehead still remembered hers pressed against it. Finally, she whispered, "This is where it stops. It has to." But her fingers curled tighter into my shirt. I swallowed, the words scraping my throat. "You don't believe that?" Her laugh came out uneven, breaking at the edges. I'm too old to be reckless. Then what am I? Her eyes flashed, raw and uncertain. You're young enough to survive this. I'm not. I stepped closer, closing what little air was left between us. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in, the air heavy with everything we hadn't said. My hand hovered at her hip, not daring to land, but close enough that the heat of her body burned against mine. You think I'll forget this? I asked. Forget you? Her breath caught, a soft sound, almost a plea. Don't make me choose. But she already was. Her body leaned into mine, her pulse rapid beneath my thumb when I reached for her wrist again. I could feel the tremor running through her. I bent lower, my voice just at her ear. Then stop running. Her eyes shut, her lips parted. For one impossible second, everything tilted, gravity, time, the rules we'd both built to keep this contained. And then she moved. Not away, not forward. She lifted her hand, traced it along the side of my jaw like she'd been holding that gesture inside for years. This will ruin me, she whispered. Then let me ruin you. The words were out before I could stop them. Messy, reckless, too much. But true. Her forehead fell against my chest, and I felt the weight of her choice pressing into me. Her breath was shallow, her body trembling against mine. And then, slowly, deliberately, she tilted her face up. Our lips hovered inches apart, the charged space between them electric, unbearable. We didn't kiss. Not yet. That would have been too easy, too clean. Instead, she whispered against my mouth, her voice barely air. You don't know what you're asking for. I do, I said. The words landed. She looked at me then, really looked, past the age, past the fear, past the whispers we both knew would follow. Something shifted in her eyes. A surrender. A recognition. Her hands finally slid around my back, pulling me close, no more half-steps. My arms found her waist, anchoring her as if letting go now would mean losing her forever. The moment was messy, shaky breath, damp cheeks, laughter tangled with something like grief. But it was real. And it was ours. For the first time since the barbecue, there was no distance left to close. Clarity didn't come as words. It came in the way she held me tighter, in the way I pressed my face into her shoulder, both of us knowing the choice had been made. No more pretending. No more running. Whatever came next, we understood each other fully now. We didn't rush. After all the holding back, the almost, the silences, the last thing either of us wanted was to crash through the moment. So we stood there in her living room, bodies close, hands unsure but unwilling to let go. The rain had started again outside, steady against the windows, sealing us in with its hush. Her head rested lightly against my chest. I could feel every rise and fall of her breath, the uneven rhythm slowly smoothing out. She didn't speak, not at first. Neither did I. When she finally lifted her face, her eyes looked different. Not lighter, no, the weight was still there, but softer. Like she'd stopped fighting herself. You make me feel ridiculous, she said, shaking her head with a half-smile. Why? Because I'm supposed to know better. Her fingers brushed against my hand, tentative at first, then lacing through mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. But I don't want better. I want this. Her honesty hit harder than any touch. I squeezed her hand, afraid if I loosened it, she'd pull away. Then stop calling it ridiculous. She laughed under her breath, a sound I hadn't realized I'd been waiting for. Her free hand came up, sliding over my cheek, thumb lingering near my mouth. For a second she studied me, as if trying to memorize the exact shape of my face, the way my eyes refused to look anywhere but hers. And then she kissed me. Not rushed, not desperate. Just slow, certain, like she'd finally let herself fall into the choice she'd been circling all along. When we broke apart, her forehead rested against mine. We'll have to deal with everything else later, she murmured. I know. People will talk. Let them. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. She didn't argue. Not this time. We ended up on the couch, the two of us curled close in the dim light. My arm around her shoulders, her head tucked beneath my chin, our fingers still tangled tight. Nothing flashy. Just contact. Just the comfort of finally not resisting. She traced circles on the back of my hand absent-mindedly, her body warm against mine. I listened to the rain, the quiet hum of the house, the soft rhythm of her breathing. For once, there was no rush to the next moment, no fear of interruption. I thought loneliness was safer, she said after a long pause. But then you walked into the kitchen. I smiled, pressing a kiss to her hair. I'm not going anywhere. Her body relaxed into me at that, like a knot finally loosening. The storm outside deepened, thunder low in the distance. But inside it was calm. We sat there, holding on, not saying much more. No perfect promises, no grand declarations. Just two people, flawed and raw, finally choosing not to step back anymore. And it was enough.